Welcome to Vintage Americana, exploring and restoring rural American culture. I'm your hostess, Holly, and in this first episode we're going to take us to the intersection of good stewardship and the spirit of place, why it's important, and how to take better care of the embarrassment of riches all around us. Which means we probably ought to start with the question of why. Why does any of this matter? Maybe it's something that comes with age. When we got married, my husband and I intended to do the whole house in the suburbs 2.3 kids thing that probably would have culminated in a Joanna Gaines-inspired 3-bedroom house in a development full of houses that all look alike, spending our time shuttling between dance class, PTA, soccer practice, and so on. And then any number of things happened. Baby number 1 was micro-preemie. Both of our daughters struggle with autism. That suburb doesn't look so good when you can't let your kids out to run the neighborhood with the other kids. All the obstacles that had stood in the way of that plan started to look like they'd been there to keep us from making some choices that wouldn't have worked out very well. Both of us have our roots in farm families. We have memories of wandering meadows and building forts out of sticks in the woods. We weeded kitchen gardens, fed the cows, and played in the hayloft, well away from busy streets, neighbors' pools, and other things that we now regard as hazards for our children. So, one thing led to another, and now we own a little over 10 acres of overgrown meadow, with a walnut plantation on one side and a fence row with a sugar bush on the other. The new plan is to make the most of what we have now. Let's start with the idea of good stewardship. This is one of those concepts that gets misused, twisted around, and stuffed into the form that's most convenient for someone at the moment. Stewardship is the art and effort of making the best possible use of our blessings. And by that, I do not mean getting the best return on your investment. Unfortunately, this is where everything that falls into the prosperity gospel term tends to go off the rails. Yes, good financial discipline is certainly a useful thing, but it's nowhere near the only thing. And people who go whole hog into any of these systems, whether it's Joel or Susie or Dave or whoever, fixate on the dollars and the cents. Does that mean that I'm talking about sustainability? Not really. Sustainability also loses track of things. The idea of sustainability is to be able to obtain something without depleting future supplies. And in general, that is a good thing. But there's a tendency to get a little tunnel vision about what is sustainable. Well, I bought organic cookies in sustainable packaging, so we're all good. Are we? What did you really do there? You made a choice that purports to let you have your cookies without harming the ability of your grandchildren to also have cookies. And they were made in accordance with a government-approved definition of organic, which may or may not mean what you think it does. But how much of that went through your head when you bought them? Sustainability is a shorthand term that lets us feel good about certain decisions, but maybe we're not getting what we think we are. Am I talking about self-sufficiency? Not that either. First, self-sufficiency is a continuum. Nobody is ever really completely self-sufficient. Even the most ardent off-grid prepper probably isn't weaving their own cloth, smelting their own metals, and making all their own tools. Is it a good thing to become less dependent on the extremely fragile web of consumerism? You betcha. Everyone will find themselves on a different point on that continuum, and that's okay. But I want to think about it a little harder and merge it with some other ideas. Stewardship means more than making sure that your dinner doesn't mean someone starves in 10 years. It means leaving behind a greater wealth of blessing than you started with. Regenerative farming is an example of good stewardship. The whole goal in regenerative farming is not just to get away from the extractive agribusiness model, but also to engage in improving soil structure and treating the farm as an ecosystem, so that the next person to farm it takes on a land more productive than it was when you started. Maybe that idea goes further than just the ground. Can we also apply that same reasoning to the social and cultural aspects of our lives? Day by day, the constant drone of insipid pop culture continues on, and we lose those unique aspects that tie communities and families together. In the same way that regenerative farming rebuilds soil structure, concentrating on preserving culture can help rebuild our social networks until they're healthy again. Can we regain the rich tapestry of all the things we used to know and do and enjoy? We feel around at the edges a little bit when we talk about something that's authentic. As much as we all like to make fun of the artisanal products listed on Etsy, part of us recognizes that craftsmanship is more than just making stuff, and that living as and among craftsmen enriches us all. Why do we buy that handmade bread knife that was carved from reclaimed elm? It has qualities all its own, a uniqueness not to be found in the entire display of knives at Macy's. All around us, every day, our things and our places are becoming relentlessly homogenized. We wear the same jeans from the same mall store. We live in houses with the same floor plan made by the same national building company, whether we're in Dallas or Duluth. And all the while, real uniqueness slips away. Not the fake kind promised by politicians, but the real differences in art, architecture, flavors, customs, and people that make up the spirit of a place, or its genius loci. That's an important concept for me. Different places have different essences. And sometimes it even feels that the older a place is, the richer the essence. In fact, I'll link an article in the show notes called The Ghosts of Place by Michael Bell that fleshes out the idea. There was a time when a dog trot porch told you were driving through the deep south, or that it was obvious those steeply peaked roof lines were there to help shed the snow, with smaller windows to minimize heat loss in the cold and snowy north. The wonders of technology mean we can throw out all those old architectural variations. But should we? Do we lose more than just energy efficiency when the houses in Tucson look just like the houses in Bangor? Are we poorer in something to live in a society that no longer features cakewalks and community cookbooks? My parents both tell stories of the town where they grew up, and the tradition of a parade of all the costumed children down Main Street on Halloween. How many small towns still take the time to come together for these simple rituals? They are still there, dwindling quietly away across the country. Little tastes of vintage Americana. There's so much out there to rediscover and hang on to. Will you come with me? Are you ready to explore the places, spirit, skills, and history? If you do come along on this trip, what will you see? We're going to talk about slow food, how food traditions help us to hang on to our culture and infuse our communities. You can bake with me. We'll bake in season, and you might get some of my family recipes, and a few that I've managed to reconstruct from my husband's memories. Some of them will even be gluten-free because my oldest daughter is sensitive and I don't like her to feel left out. We'll talk about where those ingredients come from and why eating local might be more important than any of those labels at the grocery store. You can't get more local than your own backyard. So we'll do some gardening, plant berry patches, and start an orchard. Come along while I try to improve my grafting skills. Listen to me rant about apple varieties, genetic diversity, and why heirloom varieties are so important. We'll talk about finding lost apple varieties, and with luck, we'll go on a field trip or two hunting them. Can you tell you're going to be helping my husband and I set up our little independent farmstead? Maybe we'll even get out of design and financing hell, and you'll get to come along on our house building journey. Hey, a girl can hope. Right now, I have a beautiful plan on my desk for a Swedish farmhouse that I'd love to make a reality. And as we move forward, we'll be adding livestock. We'll talk husbandry, ethical raising of animals, and we'll be getting into heritage breeds, genetic diversity, and how to support that work. Can you tell this is a hobby horse of mine? In the meantime, there are lots of other things to explore. Remember that walnut plantation? Yep, we'll be talking about management of those sorts of long-term resources. And all slow food and cute critters do not a farm girl make. I'm on a bit of a mission to pull at least a little bit back from fast fashion. I do really have an issue with dressing my teenage daughters, who are developmentally much younger than their years, in the sorts of junior hooker wear available on the market. And for my own part, I'm at that awkward age, where those same mall fashions aren't something I can wear without looking like I'm in denial. On the other hand, I don't feel old enough for polyester pants and sweatshirts with flowers and birds on them. So prepare for some history bounding adapted for farm and town, and come along as I make use of some historical patterns and fashion materials, changing things up to make adaptive clothes for my kids, and useful things to wear for my husband and I. Nor is the family the only thing that needs to stay clothed. Expect to see a little quilting, some knitting, and all of the useful, homely skills that bring spirit and comfort into a home. While we're pretty focused on trying to get our little place in the world straightened out, it's not an island. If we're being good stewards of our farm, we should see a result in an increase in biodiversity too. So keeping some wild spaces will be a priority. I'd even like to plant an English-style hedge using American species. Over time, it should serve as both a barrier to the weather and livestock and a shelter for birds and small animals. We're not an island either. The farm is part of the environment, and we're part of the community. It has a history, and we'll explore that too. I'll take you antiquing with me. We'll go visit some old one-room schoolhouses and take a peek at old family homesteads. Family history is communicated down the generations in keeping with traditions. And I love traditions. We'll try to explore some, and maybe even make some new ones. Now, most of what I have planned for you is based on my little corner of the world and draws on my community, my culture, and my interests. But I'm hoping that I can inspire you to explore your own place, find its genius loci, and help hang on to your own flavor of vintage Americana. Are you coming?